Welcome to my YouTube channel. Now, today we're going live and we got to talk about the Epstein files, backfires on the Democrats, the drone strikes, and Trump news and ICE in Minnesota. And when I say Trump news, Trump is basically, if you did not know, yesterday they broke the news. They're going to be investing in the future of our babies. And that is a beautiful thing because, this is, how they redistribute wealth. And a lot of people say Trump got a heart like Hitler, but why would a racist president, invest in children? And that's all American children. So, I guess they're banking on, the Democrats are banking on, the character of the president, the demonization of the president. And they want individuals to not participate, but that's not going to happen moving forward. So this is the radio show. We're going live weekly just to have this conversation. And I will be all in the comments, responding to your comments and everything. So let's get at it. So the Epstein files backfires on the Democrats. We've been hearing release the files for a very long time, and the world knows that under the Biden administration, they had the opportunity to release the files, but it seems like there was only a smear campaign, and the Democrats are pretty much throwing things at the wall and actually seeing what sticks. And at this point, nothing is sticking at this time because the Democratic Party is pretty much, in shambles, in tatters. The Democratic Party, man, like I said, I didn't know that we will witness the demise and the destruction of one of the powerful political parties in American history. But now it seems as though the party is diminishing, and the American people, are smarter than the average bear, and we're using our common sense. And when I say we're using our common sense, I mean just really look at what's going on. For years, they was trying to destroy Trump's character, tried to blow his head off, and now he's back in the White House, and you didn't expect him to clap back. You didn't expect him to retaliate. Every action gets a reaction, and right now we're witnessing something beautiful because the president is doing an amazing job, and I'm calling balls and strikes. And more than likely, he's going to go down in history as one of the greatest presidents in American history, especially when they settled what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. Now, and if he, get a deal and a treaty going on there, it's a wrap. And what we are looking for in terms of investing, we're looking for opportunities because the newly freed, Black Americans who have abandoned the party of slavery, the party of the KKK, the party of Jim Crow, the party of the 94 crime bill, the party of the welfare state, the party of all of these negative things that destroyed the country. I've been in think tanks and I've been talking to some amazing individuals. And I asked a question and already knew the answer. So within the last 60 years, what meaningful legislation has passed to benefit the culture or to benefit, my racial group, which is Black America? And it was crickets. Because everything that has been signed into law was for everything outside of the Black race. Because if you look at the civil rights movement, it was for, desegregating the South and giving more opportunities for Black Americans or the descendants of the transatlantic slave. But some strange reason, the benefactors was the Women Lives movement. OK, and you can see the power that, women have. And I'm talking about white liberal women. The LGBTQ community has, has flourished and grown to a level that we never thought or intended. And then if you look at, what's going on with abortion and all of these other things, you really, have to ask yourself, what was the plan? The plan was to eradicate, the plan was to erase Black America. And I believe that's why Jamie Foxx had that medical scare, because he did a movie they cloned Tyrone. And basically what happened, they're pretty much trying to extinct Black humans. They want the Bruno Mars, the biracials and all of that, because when you look at American politics, you would see, light-skinned, green-eyed Cory, Booker or Hakeem Jeffries, but you don't really see no real brothers, because the real brothers are the sacrificial lambs, because, the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice, and the darker the berry, the darker the flesh, the deeper the root. And the root is, what we got to fix, and that's Black America. So when I sit, and I've been paying attention and I've watched the politics this week, I played a real close attention to see if, the Epstein files was really going to be something, because Trump signed the paperwork. They got about another 15 days before they release everything or declassify or release things that they can release. But it backfired on the Democrats, because, anytime that a camera was out, these individuals will get in front of the camera, Trump and Epstein, and showing all of these pictures, just preying on the lowest of the lowest vibration. And that's their base. They play on the ignorance and the unintelligence of humans, because this is why, they want to keep you, dumb and stupid. Because if you look at our elected officials, and I have to look at the elected officials on the Democratic side, the baby boomers, they sold their souls. Okay. And there's, they cannot repair it. They're going to die in the wilderness, because anytime that I have a conversation with a baby boomer, they want to give me a history lesson. And in the world that we're living in with Wikipedia, Chat GPT, and Gemini and Siri and all of that, it's not even a debate. Okay. Because we know without shadow of a doubt that Black America was compromised at the assassination of JFK, and the civil rights movement, signed the deal literally, and they have become a branch of the Democratic Party. This is why, the Black Power movement was erased, because, we was black and we was proud, but all of a sudden they changed us from Negroes and from Black Americans to African Americans, and it's crazy. And it is what it is. So just give me a little bit of time, Mr. Matrix. This is how this thing works. Okay, you got to get out, and you got to just, hang in there. So just stick in for a little while, and I'll continue. Because what I do is, after I get off, I chop this bad boy up, into reels and make it happen. But if you got a question, Mr. Matrix, if you want to send me, a link so I can actually jump on with you, let's have a conversation. You know what I'm saying? Because they typically, and that's the mindset of that lowest vibration, the beta male, the homosexual male, the baby boomer, and the female. Okay. Because real men, we have conversations and we respect what's going on. So why don't you hit that like, hit that notification, help this algorithm, because I know without a shadow of a doubt that they do not want to have this conversation. And the reason why, they're just a limited people on, because they're shadow banning the conversations when it comes to the Epstein files. Okay, they're shadow banning the conversations when it comes to the Epstein files. I can go viral right now, and if I was to do something stupid or follow their lead or to jump on the hate Donald Trump train, but my integrity, is intact, and I love my God too much, and I'll be willing to talk to myself than to sell my soul just to get a click and to get a like. Because at the end of the day, sometimes, you have to step out on faith. And a lot of individuals, they don't really, they don't get it. But then down the road, they'll figure it out. Because I've been having these conversations. A lot of my brothers sit back and say, man, you was right. Because they remember back in 2016, they remember when it was Trump and Hillary. And they were talking about the lesser of two evils. And I was doing those videos of Hillary Clinton calling, black men super predators, and we needed to be brought to heel like dogs. I reminded them that Joe Biden, he pretty much pushed the 94 crime bill on the Senate floor and got it passed 94-6 on the Senate floor. One of the last, nonpartisan, measures, because if the Democrats would be willing to do this to their own people, then the Republicans was on board. So now we're looking at a situation where, it's time, because Black America is no longer, a brand of the Democratic Party, because we know the truth. Anything that has been associated with the Democratic Party when it comes to race is a sacrifice for the Black movement. Okay, because in 1964, when they signed the Civil Rights Act, that's approximately 60 years ago. And where's the, the land? Where is the commerce? Where's the beautiful Black communities? Where's the equality? So basically what they did, like Lyndon B. Johnson said, I have those niggers voting Democrats for the next 200 years. And unless a phenomenon happened, and the phenomenon is the internet, the social media. It is what it is. So let me see here. Hi, my name is Jake. What's up, Jake? My name is Sean. Appreciate you, Jake. Hit that like, hit that notification, because like I said, it helped the algorithm, and they do not want us having these conversations about these Epstein files. A shadow ban. I took some time and did a video, and it showed me in the back office that it was limited, that there was not going to put commercials on it because they want to control the narrative. They do not want us to have this conversation. So the Epstein files, what they have released, and Trump did sign the paperwork in terms of, the Epstein files, for the to release all of the information. It backfired because you have Democratic Congresswomen texting Jeffrey Epstein, having conversations and taking notes, asking Jeffrey Epstein, what questions to say. And then Hakeem Jeffries, after Jeffrey Epstein had pleaded guilty for, sex trafficking, prostitution of minors, Hakeem Jeffries was soliciting campaign funding. And see, these are the things that they do not want us to talk about. And these are the things that interest me the most, because like I said, I could be, one of these individuals that just follow the trend, but you could turn the TV on and get that. But you got to get, certain things from, different types of mindsets, different types of human beings, that communicate, and that's on a different vibration. So the Epstein files backfired, and they asked for them to be totally released, and we know without a shadow of a doubt, if President Trump, had anything to do with the Epstein files, we would have already heard about it, just like he got the multiple felony charges and all of that. And he's still the president of the United States, and he's doing a pretty good job. So now they want us to talk about how the Department of War and our Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, that he is taking some scrutiny because they have been sending drone strikes and destroying the Venezuelan drug running boats, these speedboats that's out in the ocean. So the Department of War is using drones to actually strike them down. And there is a particular situation where they struck down the drone, have struck a boat with multiple drugs on it. And then they saw that a few individuals survived, and they were communicating, and they were attempting to get back on the boat and wait for someone to pick them up. And then somebody made the call and eliminated the two targets that was left. And, in war, your command may have been, kill everybody. But the Democrats want to have a conversation. I got people in the comments saying, say hi. They want to make sure I'm not a bot. Good morning to you. This is Welcome to a Better Black America TV. We're recording live out of Los Angeles, California. And it is what it is. But if you got a question, put it in the comments. I'll be here for a little while today, and I want to communicate with the people because I've been uploading videos and doing that. But it's a good time. It's a good day. So let's engage. So what do you think about the Epstein files? What do you think about the missile strikes? And then another topic of discussion that the Trump administration has officially sent ICE agents to Minnesota to basically go after the Somalian immigrants. If you did not know, the Minnesota tri-state area is one of the largest communities for Somalian immigrants. And with the PPP, the EDD, and the COVID relief and all of that, they have found a lot of fraud, and they're associating the fraud to a congresswoman, who is a Muslim and declare her alliance with her people. These are things that we got to pay attention to, because America is a Christian nation. So when you're dealing with Muslims and jihadists and all of that, it's just a matter of time. And then another one, what happened with the socialist mayor of New York? We're not having any conversations about him. So what's really going on? And when we don't have them going after Trump, when we don't have a chaos, then something is going on. and we got to figure this thing out, because the Democratic Party will not be able to rebrand itself. It lost its stronghold on Black America. You know, it's basically its core is what you would say, you know, the baby boomers, you know, the individuals who, you know, are willing to die in the wilderness, and they do not care about tomorrow. They just worried about getting up today, and it is what it is. So Generation X, you know, is going to have to take the mantle, not the baton, because there is no baton to pass, but have to, you know, step up to the plate and make sure that God's people do not perish due to the lack of knowledge. So Mr. Major put a comment. What is your opinion on John F. Kennedy and, let me see, JFK, various policies regarding the community of color and immigration policies? So, and you're talking about JFK. Like, I'm a blood-born American citizen who traced its ancestors back to Jamestown, Virginia in the year 1619. So I'm not, you know, with the immigrant. Okay, I'm with legal immigration, you know, but in a sense of people coming to this country, taking our land, taking our opportunities, I'm totally against it. Okay, because as an American citizen, my community, the Black community, has yet to establish itself. Yes, we have Black individuals in positions of power, but when you have uppity Black people, their job is to protect, you know, the upper whites. And this is why, you know, they can't do anything for their community. This is why they can't, you know, do anything outside the box, because we got enough Black wealth to actually change the community, to change everything. We do. But for whatever reason, we can't do it, because if you take, you know, the Democratic donor money, if you are a part of the Democratic Party, you have to push their narrative and their agenda. So this is why you will have Black elected officials fighting for the immigrants, fighting for the migrants. And this is why you will have Black elected officials, you know, fighting for abortion rights, not knowing that Margaret Sanger, the creator of Planned Parenthood, is known as the mother of Black genocide. She's a eugenist in terms of population control. So they're basically using our elected officials to destroy their own people. And this is why what they call the talented 10, and this is why they have the divine 9 and these bourgeoisie Black people, because they're just basically looking out to, you know, fatten their pockets. They're not looking out for their community. They're not looking out, you know, for the least of these. They're not looking out, you know, for, you know, the average American citizen who pretty much want to live a healthy, beautiful life and die gracefully. You know, they pretty much sold their soul. So the truth is the truth, and the truth shall make us free. So, you know, we fighting a monster. You know, we fighting a monster. I knew without a shadow of a doubt, if I was to put the Epstein file Backfires in this title, that it was going to be limited and banned. But it is what it is. It is what it is. So we're fighting against these evildoers in high places. So as a Black man who's a nonpartisan independent, you know, I respect the Oval Office. Okay, just like my Bible says, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. So, you know, I got to respect that. But I have choice. And when I have Black baby boomers or Black beta males or Black gay men, you know, tell me that you have to pick a side. No, that's slavery. Okay, one thing that we do have, and one thing that we do get from God, is the freedom to choose. And that's the freedom of choice. So I choose to do what Jesus did. He didn't come to change the scribe or the Pharisee. He came to fulfill. So my job is to fulfill the promise of the Most High. And this is what we're going to do. And like I said, and we're going to, you know, it's like I said, it's a fight. So we got to, just like in the book of Revelations, we got to jump on our white horses with our crown and bow and flee from the pale horse, the black horse, the red horse, and, you know, get to higher ground. Because Dr. King said his eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, and he's seen the mountaintop. But for some strange reason, the baby boomers, the beta males, the Black gays or the Black homosexuals want to keep us in the wilderness because they are comfortable and they have favor in the wilderness, because the wilderness is owned and regulated by the Democratic Party. So if you want, you know, if you want to be free, you know, you got to separate yourself. And when I use the word sanctification, I say it often, that merely means separating ourselves from these evildoers in high places and separating ourselves from, these entities that will lead us to hell. And this is why when Dr. King, is on record speaking to Harry Belafonte, after he realized he got played, and he said that he believes that he delivered his people to a burning house. And this is why we got to get out of that burning house and be nonpartisan independents. So let me see here what we got in these comments. Okay, I appreciate that. Somebody said, preacher brother, hey, each one teach one. Let me see Mr. Matrix again. I guess it's just me and you having this conversation. And Mr. Matrix said, I'm not from America, but I understand what you're talking about. I've experienced something similar. Hey, and it is what it is. And like I said, I know how to trick the system. There's other platforms out there, and this is one of them. And I got other platforms. We talking about 50,000 followers. We talking about subscribers. But I got to crack this algorithm. On YouTube. But I understand. I didn't want to do the trick bait. I wanted to keep it 100 because the topics of today is the Epstein files backfires. The drone strikes that the Department of War Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is getting some scrutiny for, unaliving, everybody on the ship or on the boat. And then Trump. And then if you did not know, this racist president that does not like people, Trump, has got with the Dell family, the descendants of Dell Computer. They invested $6 billion. And the Trump administration is going to distribute that in the next 2 years to $1,000 investment accounts for all babies being born in the year of 25 and the year of 26. And it may even go further because I think the next presidency will be up in 2028. But, the $1,000 investments. Now, let's not be fools. If the president of the United States has gone on record, and like I said, I will do the homework and figure it out. But if the president of the United States goes on record and he wants to invest in the future, that's a wealth exchange. So just imagine if it works correctly. Just imagine individuals being born in 2025, 2026, 2027, and immediately get a $1,000 investment bank account, meaning that $1,000 is going to be invested to grow. So over an 18-year period, you're talking about between $95,000 and $150,000 that these individuals will get on their 18th birthday. Now, a house divided cannot stand. So just imagine if we were, not enemies and not fighting amongst each other. And we sat back and said, OK, let's make sure that this happens. And then, depending on our age, what we are today, and we're still alive 18 years from now, and we're able to see this thing coming to fruition. That's a good thing. But when I say a house divided cannot stand, you're going to get an opposition. The Democrats, like I said, they have Trump deranged syndrome. The baby boomers have pretty much sold their souls. They think that they're going to get into heaven without even changing their wicked ways. That's crazy to me. But they'll sit back and, try to demonize an individual for just speaking the truth. Because for the last, 5, 6, 7 years, they can go online and spew hate and talk about the president and, he's going to go to jail. And then they tried to shoot the president and all of this and that. Now that the smoke has cleared and the smoke has settled, where are all these individuals? They don't even post anymore. They don't have nothing to say. Only thing that they do is jump in the comments of my content and say, why you on President Trump's jock like that? Why you believe in the president like that? And I'm sitting back saying, listen, I'm documenting what's going on right now. I'm with that algorithm. I'm riding the wave. I'm basically trying to do what's right for my people, because if the president of the United States has gone on record and he's willing to invest $1,000 in newly born babies, and on their 18th birthday they are able to extract those funds from that's going to be invested over the next 18 years, and college fund, entrepreneurship, that's money for a down payment on a house, that can change the lives and the trajectory of humanity as we see it. So if the president of the United States has gone on record and he's talking about these things, then somebody has to be wise enough, smart enough, educated enough to sit back and say, okay, let's figure it out. And then once I do figure it out, and once I get that information, I'm going to share it. Because if the president is going to do that, my job is to get those accounts, in to as many babies, that we can. Because like I said, knowledge is power. And a lot of times we just don't know. But just imagine if we were to get, the masses signed up for those programs. Just imagine the mother with 2 and 3 kids within that time frame, and then able to extract, $500,000, in the next 18 years. Just think about it. That's a good thing. But you have a Democrat, a baby boomer, a white Karen or a white liberal, a homosexual black man or a beta black man, talking about, he lying, he ain't gonna do nothing. No, you're not gonna do nothing, because it's what we call human error. Because like I said, if you do not love yourself, it is so easy to hate. And I'm gonna say that again. If you do not love yourself, the easiest thing that you could do is hate on somebody else. Because individuals that I know that are ultra successful, when we have conversations, they give us a word of advice. They communicate on a different vibration. But when you got these individuals that's broke, busted, and disgusted, they lived a life of longevity, but they got nothing to show for it. They're depending on the government to pretty much take care of them because they was not good stewards with their lives. Then they really want everybody else to sink with the ship. And that's what it's all about. This is why you have a lot of Democrats out there, that no matter what the situation is, vote blue no matter who. Okay, but voting blue no matter who, meaning you have to support killing babies with no term limits. Because during the debates, President Trump asked Kamala Harris, he asked her, he said, let's have this conversation since this is a debate. Now, what's the term limits? Is it 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months? And her response to that, you can look it up, was come on. Because if you are a Democrat and you're going to get Democratic money, from the donors because you want to be elected, you have to basically say, your talking point is, I respect the woman's right to choose. Okay, but is it the embryo? Is it the first trimester? I once again, believe in the woman's right to choose, and that's basically saying that you agree with abortion with no term limits. The child could have had, or the mother could have had a, the little party, for the baby, gender reveal and all of that, but then somehow get into it with the baby's father and then decide to abort. And that's okay. And there are situations where they have aborted babies and the baby heart was beating and they just sit there and let the child. So to be a Democrat, you have to be, down with abortion with no term limits. And how immoral is that? That's one. Number two, you got to be a part of the Babylonians. And when I say a part of the Babylonians in the Bible, were homosexuals. The King Nebuchadnezzar and all these guys, and King Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon. And what they would do, for males to come into their city and or town, they had their way with the men. Okay, so to be a part of Babylon, you had to take it from the king and the king's men, and perform, homosexual acts. Okay, that's what that was all about. So isn't it quite strange to have the Democratic Party, one of the most powerful units of the Democratic Party is the LGBTQ Elemental Peace Society. And I did not say LGBTQ because there's no such thing as bisexual. That's grooming. If you are a man, you can have a wife with 30 kids. But if you practice homosexuality, or homosexual acts with a man, you are a homosexual. Okay, so it's not a bisexual. No, that's impossible. Okay, that's a grooming. That was the way that they groomed you into accepting being a part of that particular party. So first of all, number one, you gotta support killing babies with no term limits. Number two, you got to accept the LGBTQ, because that's the most powerful, sector of the Democratic Party. And then the third component, you have to embrace immigration. And everything that I just mentioned is either anti-God or anti-American. It's either anti-God or anti-American. Okay, and Mr. Matrix, you're my number one fan today. So question in the comments. So if you on, and hit that like, hit the notification, hit the comments, help the algorithm. But let's have this conversation. This is just a radio show today. Let me see here. If identity shouldn't define a person, why do politicians discuss and rely heavily on identity categories to shape policies? Identity plays a large role. Identity politics is real. It's what they call, Mr. Matrix, propaganda. Okay, because when an individual sit back and say, oh, I don't see color. Really, everybody that's watching this right now, the limited few of you that's watching it right now, see a black man having a conversation. But then you got to know, okay, is he straight? Oh, absolutely. I'm as straight as they come, alpha male. Okay. And then you got to sit back and say, okay, now, what is your social, a conservative, liberal? I'm very conservative. I'm a nonpartisan independent, and what they call a centrist, and some individuals call us theocrats. And theo means God, and crat means to rule or rule by. Okay, and it's the flip of democrat, because demo means demon, diablo, or devil in Spanish and Portuguese, and the word krat in the Greek means to rule by. So democrat means ruled by the devil, and they don't want to have that conversation because they are very comfortable living in the darkness, and very, comfortable allowing individuals to pretty much put themselves in compromising positions, because misery loves company. So just imagine if we all raised our vibration and we became, very moral and, God-fearing, the world would be a better place. Okay. Now, Sean Price, how you doing? Sean Price said he is straight. He is straight as 9:15. and I totally understand that. Because like I said, it's sad in these days and times that makes a difference. Okay. But as a heterosexual male, I struggle, with fornication. One day God's going to bless me with a beautiful wife, and, then I have to worry about that, but like I said, nobody's perfect. We're not judging, but now you can see and understand why an individual will be a Democrat, because the party has no morals and is built on hate. All of the hate speech and the Jasmine Crockett's and the Hakeem Jeffries and they go out and blatantly lie, and they do all of these things, and try to make it seem like it's somebody else when it's actually them, because God's people shall not perish due to the lack of knowledge. And like I said, the Epstein files backfired. We have not heard anything about the Epstein files all week. Okay. Now the Democrats released some pictures of his house. Okay. And no one's behind me. And if anything's behind me, it's the Spirit of the Lord. And I appreciate that. But once again, what are we going to do as human beings? Can we, align ourselves as nonpartisan independents, because everybody's not a MAGA Trump supporter and everybody's not a Democrat, but we do love this country. And I do appreciate what President Trump is doing for this country. I see what he's trying to do. When you go out there and you invest in the future, when you go on record and you're willing to put money behind what you're saying and put $1,000 checks in the bank account of newborn babies, and over the span of 18 years, invest those monies, and on the 18th birthday, those individuals can, come on, man. That's a blessing. That's a blessing. And then look at all the, the wars that he, have stopped. Every week is somebody in the White House signing some peace treaty, but the media wants to spin it in a different direction. The media wants to say this or say that, but the man is doing an amazing job. And I cannot name one president that has done, more than President Trump has done in just a year and a half. I can't. And then somebody said that they're waiting on the 51st state. So would that be DC, or would that be Canada, or which, in terms of what would be the 51st state? Let's, talk to me, I'll talk back. So what would be the 51st state? Okay. And let me see here. Okay. And they would love to have Canada as a 51st state. Well, Canada, we can learn from Canada. And I appreciate that because the healthcare system in Canada is much better than the health insurance scam that we have here in the United States. So if you did not know, the Obamacare is an epic fail. The Democrats kept the government closed and didn't get anything out the deal because of, they were talking about health care. Okay, but it's not health care, it's health insurance versus health care. Because right now we have what we call health insurance. And there's individuals that, for an example, just to make it make sense, we got common sense over here. So just say, for instance, it's law for us to have auto insurance. But there's some individuals who's been paying auto insurance for the last 20, 30 years and have not had one claim or one accident. Think about that. So just imagine the scam of health insurance, because there's individuals that pay health insurance on a monthly basis, but they get their normal checkups, but they don't have medical conditions. Think about it. So when you talk about health care, why not make it a situation where it's like an automobile? Okay. Car care. So just say, for instance, if you've been paying your auto insurance and all of this stuff, just say we didn't pay auto insurance. But if you happen to get into an accident, there's a situation where you go and get your car fixed for free because the tab will be picked up by the federal government. And this is the health care program that's going to be unleashed onto America in 2026, because health insurance is a scam and health insurance only benefits the insurance companies. So just imagine, if, the healthcare system was to be reformed and we can go to a doctor and get our checkups. We're not paying any premiums. We're not paying any copays. But if you have some type of ailment or some type of sickness, you just go into the doctor and they fix it. And then they send the bill to the government. That's how it should be, and that's how it has to be. And this is what's going to repeal and replace, this Obamacare or this Unaffordable Care Act, because it is a scam. Okay, we have enough money and enough resources to pretty much, have a healthy America and to have a healthcare program. Because why should you be penalized for not paying into health insurance? See, that was a scam. Obamacare is a scam. Okay. And somebody put in the comments, that's how it works in the UN. And like I said, the only way we can have these conversations is if we separate ourselves from the party of slavery, the party of the KKK, the party of the hanging and the lynchings, the party of the mass incarceration, the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party is pretty much owned by the donors. They do what they're told. This is why these individuals have an issue with President Trump, because he did not need their donor money. He don't need anything from them. And Trump is the first president to have no association with slavery. A lot of people don't know that Bill Clinton is from Clinton, Arkansas. He come from a family of slave owners. Okay. And if you look at any movie, the slave owner, they hang out and they're very comfortable with the slaves. So when you see white Democrats hanging out with blacks, that's pretty much what we're looking at. But, we gotta have an argument, because the Democrats are deemed themselves as the opposition and the resistance party, and they will clap back on anything that we say. But right now they are quiet as church mouses because, they have been, put, in a loop, meaning, the hate speech and all this stuff that's going on. And then now when they just pretty much flip the climate, now they have nothing to say. After the attempted assassination of President Trump, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and then the National Guardsmen, the man and the woman in D.C. that actually got shot by, a Muslim guy. Okay, who's here in this country, because of the rhetoric. Now you see how somehow, some way, they pretty much told them to be quiet and shut up, because this has been the quietest week and a half that I've seen the Democrats, because, you would think that all that talking and all this, the Jasmine Crockett's and the Hakeem Jeffries and all of this stuff But then now when the smoke clears, what's going on? The president is doing his job. The Democrats, they have no, they can't even share content. And it's crazy. And let me see here. Somebody put this, they could if they stopped sending money to other countries. You're absolutely right. And this is why, as a black man, I embrace America First. And America First is the parent company of Community First. And in the city that I live in, it's a hood. And we're trying to flip it into a community prior to the 2028 Olympics. The Vermont corridor. There's no banking. There's no healthy foods or grocery stores. There's no credit unions. There's no shopping malls or strip malls or anything like that. But within the next year and a half, we get an opportunity to make it happen. And it is what it is. And Mr. Matrix is from Iran. Man, it's crazy that, I could talk to an individual in Iran, but they will shadow ban my content, locally, because, it is what it is. So from an Iranian perspective, I'm assuming, you're of the Islam or the Muslim faith. Talk to me, Mr. Matrix, because here in America, I've been seeing a whole lot going on because in Minnesota, these are Muslim Africans. What's the difference between a Somalian Muslim and an Iranian Muslim? And it's strange that, anything outside of Christianity attaches itself to the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party, in terms of freedom of religion, they have all religions, but there's one religion that actually funds everything. And that's the Jewish religion, Israel. Okay. And I seen a documentary the other day. I didn't know that the Jews created Hollywood the way that they did. And this is why Hollywood, mass media, and everything is in place to make sure that they control the narrative so they can actually stay in power. And if you are an individual musician or entertainer, they pretty much, just think about all these American, superstars, these heroes that literally died broke or tragically, because they understand how that game works. If we can get you to put your talent out there, we can steal your catalog. Look at Prince, look at Michael Jackson, look at the, all the artists back in the 60s and 70s. So this is why we got to change the narrative and be man enough and woman enough to stand up, against unrighteousness. Because I've never seen a righteous man or woman forsaken, nor their seed beggeth bread, meaning that righteous individuals' cup runneth over. Because if our seeds don't beg bread, that means we got it in abundance, and we can give it to our seeds, we can give it to our communities, and we can share the wealth. But this is why, as individuals, we got to make sure that we got to, like I said, we got to leave the Democratic Party alone. And like I said, I'm not a Trump supporter. But if Trump is the president of the United States, he's in the news, he's always tweeting, he's always in the press, he's always giving some type of speech. That's the content. If you're a political commentator like I am, what else, to talk about other than hating somebody? So if I hate somebody, that means I hate myself, because my Bible tells me to love my neighbor as I love myself. And there's a component in loving my neighbor, meaning before I can love my neighbor, I got to love myself. And if I don't love my neighbor, that means I don't love myself. That's the second most powerful commandment that, human beings can get from the highest power, because the first one is to love God with your heart, mind, and soul. Secondly is to love your neighbor as yourself. So just imagine, a love burger. God is the bread and you're the meat in between. Okay. And you can't get that other bun or that other piece of bread to make the sandwich unless you connect, with that higher power. It is what it is. So I'm just on today. I'm in these comments. Let me see here. They love us divided. Because when they divide, and I appreciate that comment, it's called divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. Unity brings love. And then, like I said, I'm a spiritual individual, and the Bible is a book of politics that contains religion, but it talks about when individuals come together. That's powerful. If one can move a molehill, two can move a mountain. If one can move 10, just two can move 10,000. And when like minds come together, the Holy Spirit, smiles upon us, drops on us, and gets us on one sheet of music. And that's a beautiful thing, and that's a beautiful thing. Let me see here. What do you think about building underneath the ballroom? Let me see here. Well, I don't know if that's a loaded question or not, but I'm gonna go ahead and reframe it. What do I think about Trump building a ballroom? I think that's smart, because a lot of individuals don't know when the White House have formal events, they rent, tents. They rent tents and tables, and they're actually outside. And one time that they did one of these events, the first time Trump was in office, it rained really bad, and it did not turn out well, but in a sense of the White House needs a formal ballroom. And if you did not know, Barack Obama did the same thing. A lot of these things that Trump is doing, other presidents have done it, because when Obama was in office, there was construction going on at the White House. And then now that Trump's in office, they got to, go to their minions or their low vibration, individual subordinates and pump them up, get into that algorithm, get on their tread, and have them sharing this information, this content. But I just want to say what happened. Because like I said, I have to go find negative content. I go to individuals' pages that was actually going viral, when Charlie Kirk got shot. It was going viral when President Trump got shot. They were saying it was fake and all of that. But now I go to the content, they haven't posted in weeks. Because when you, follow the light like a fly, it's a matter of time you're going to die. Okay. And that's the dumbest thing ever, because they use your emotions to get you emotionally jacked up, to side with them, but there has to be a time where individuals focus on who they are and do what they must do. And that's pretty much get right with God. And when you get right with God, you're getting right with self. And as a alpha male, I can understand people being comfortable on the plantation. I can understand, an elderly person, who pretty much dedicated his life to a Democratic Party. And regardless of what's going on, they're down with it, because in their mind, they have to pick a side. Because it's crazy when I get a business card from a boomer and they have a pronoun on it. And these pronouns didn't exist until within the last 10 years. And they'll sit back and justify and rationalize, well, I'm an educator. And no, you're compromised and you have no moral turpitude, and you'll be willing to do whatever you have to do just to have some type of clout, or just to feel like you're a person, in a position of power. Because when you really are focused, you could care less about what people think, about what they feel. Because there are more individuals out there that think like we do, from an independent perspective, from a nonpartisan perspective, not as a Republican, not as a Democrat, but as a human being. And we love human life. We love humanity. So there has to be an option outside of the red or the blue. And then when you figure that out, you feel entitled, because you're not a part of those groups. So you're more than likely either the judge in that political courtroom or a part of the jury. And the jury pool, could be compromised. But when you are a judge or in a position as a mediator between two rivaling tribes, then they're going to have to, adhere to the rules and regulations and the laws of the land. And now that we have found ourselves in this particular position, we can look at the Republicans and look at the Democrats and, hey, there's more conservative individuals than you can ever imagine. There's a silent majority out there. There's some fundamental Black Americans who love this country, whose ancestors fought in this country. I trace my ancestors back to North and South Carolina. Okay. I looked up, my last name, took the DNA test in terms of, where I come from. And I found out that over 1,400 Glovers from the Glover plantations in North and South Carolina enlisted in the Civil War and fought on the Union side and became victorious. And this is why the history shows that the first 9 senators, the first Black senators in the United States were 9 black men coming out of North and South Carolina. But the Democrats don't want you to know that. Okay, because they want you to, to not look at your race or not have any, love for your people, but be a part of an ethnicity. And then they could put you as an ethnic group, as African Americans, in the pot with the homosexuals, with the lesbians, with the queers, with the immigrants. And then what? And then what? Somebody in the comments said, hello, I'm not a bot. Good morning to you. It's still morning on the West Coast, 11:10 on the West Coast. So hello. Okay, got another comment. And like I said, I subscribed to you and didn't get the notification. YouTube must not like positivity. Not at all. This, like I said, I know what happened today. Next time that I go live, I'm going to just say, put one word in there and then I'll have the topics of discussion. But since I put the Epstein files backfires, the drone strikes, Trump plus ICE in Minnesota, that's the issue, because they don't want us talking about Hakeem Jeffries soliciting funds from, Jeffrey Epstein 7 years after he, basically pled guilty to sex trafficking and prostitution of minors. They don't want us to talk about, the congresswoman that was actually texting a sex offender during a congressional hearing asking, Epstein for guidance. They don't want us to talk about Bill Clinton being in Epstein's island, documented over 25 times. They don't want to talk about Bill Clinton being mentioned by the victims. They don't want us talking about that. Okay, because, when the narrative was on the other side and it was going to expose Trump and all of that, they was pushing that narrative. But now they don't want you talking about that. Okay, and then the drone strikes. They're trying to say that, the Department of War, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, have committed what they would say war crimes, because the Trump administration have been shooting down the drug runners from Venezuela. They're on the boats and all of that. So they're using drones and drone strikes, destroying, blowing these boats up, declassifying this information and showing. But one of the strikes, there were 2 survivors. And what they did, they doubled back and finished the job. So you got Democrats on record, and that already has backfired, but it's clogging up the media. But they are on record, we have to find out and see if that's a war crime, because of, like I said, it is war. Okay, they're doing something that clearly they shouldn't be doing, and the message is sent. If you get caught up, you literally will die running drugs from Venezuela to this country. That's the message. And the orders could have been, we don't know because it's classified, kill everybody. We don't know. But the Democrats are trying to find a way just to be relevant and to have some conversations, because the Epstein files backfired. They don't have nothing to say, because when they try to, condemn Trump, they can't, because he trolls them on a daily basis. On a daily basis and on a weekly basis, Trump is bringing somebody to the White House. He's having a phenomenal event. And the reason why the Democrats are mad is because they're not invited, because of, the president, the issue that they got with the president, because the elected officials, they work for Trump's opposition. Trump is a rich billionaire. Okay, you could say he's not a good bid. That's whatever. Trump was worth $6 billion before he even wanted to become president. Trump is a philanthropist. Trump, a real estate investor, builds skyscrapers. I've even stayed in his hotels, so you can't, take away that. Okay. But when it comes to, his integrity in running the country, just like with the Epstein files, he's on record saying, it was a cesspool, and, it was his administration that, put him in jail. It was in his administration when he got killed. And that's Jeffrey Epstein. But when they lost that narrative or lost that talking point and could not connect the president to Jeffrey Epstein, and then it backfired in Hakeem Jeffries soliciting fundings, sending emails, you can get to know Hakeem better. And then you have him, the congresswoman texting a sex offender during the congressional hearing, and then the Bill Clinton, and then Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew, has been kicked out of the royal palace. He's not even getting his royalties due to the connection with Jeffrey Epstein. And this is why, they got to get involved. And this is why they got to, get with Google and, tone down the narrative and shadow ban, because they don't want that truth to come out. Because Prince Andrew, that if he was with it, Bill Clinton was with it. I mean, you could just imagine, their clique or their group or the individuals that they associate themselves with. I mean, you can see the pattern. Okay, so we know what's going to happen if they do release, all of the files are declassified. See, they don't want us talking about that. They don't want us to even talk about President Trump declaring or committing $1,000, investment accounts to all newborn babies within the remainder of his administration. That's a wealth redistribution. And one thing that I'm going to do is make sure that the constituents in my community, regardless of how they feel, sign up for it. So I'm going to be, communicating and talking about that, because if the president of the United States is giving $1,000 investment accounts to newborn babies, and you can look these things up, and they already been fact checked, like I said, and if I'm wrong, I'll correct myself. But the Trump administration is giving $1,000 investment accounts to newborn babies presently now in 2025 and to the remainder of his presidency. So on their 18th birthday, they're looking to have between $95,000 and $150,000, available to them for college, to buy a house. If they have an entrepreneur spirit, just think about that. That's wealth redistribution. So if you are listening right now, please, whether you like the president or not, sign up for the program, and I will do my best to even, put a link in the comments and things moving forward, because God's people shall not perish due to the lack of knowledge. And don't let no black slaves, no black Americans, forget Trump, he can keep his money. No. Don't follow that low vibration, cesspool, crab bucket mindset, because that's how my people are. And I had to separate myself from my people because, like I said, they don't think for me, and I'm smarter than the average bear, and I'm closer, to, the real than they can ever imagine. So don't sit back and follow their lead. Go ahead and take that money, do what you need to do for your family. And then they don't want us talking about, Ilhan Omar, the Somalian, congresswoman who pretty much, like I said, the Somalian congresswoman who's an elected official, but she's for Somalians. And I appreciate that. Good time. I appreciate that. Love you for that. So the congresswoman, Ilhan Omar, there's entities that come to this country, and I need y'all to really hear me on this. There's individuals that come to this country with a plan. And these Somalians come with a plan. Okay, they went to Minnesota, they build churches, and they fraudulently, stole money. They've bought property and all of that. But what they're doing is taking food out of the mouths of American citizens. So we have to have that same energy that the Latin community have. We got to have that same, energy that the immigrant community have. We got to have that same energy with the Somalians have, because in the Minnesota, you got, Somalians, congressmen, Somalian city council, but what about here in America? They want to make it seem as though, we can't, rise above or, pivot or call an audible or learn how to turn. And that's one thing that I did. I'm out, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I would support my country, laws and legislation that's beneficial, because what the straw that broke the camel back in my community, I would go to these community meetings and, talk to, the community, and it's largely a baby booming, group, but in this particular part of South Los Angeles, and Proposition 6, And Proposition 6 was to end involuntary servitudes in the state California prison system. And somehow, some way, these baby boomers voted no. So legalized slavery is still legal in the state of California, voted by black people. And those same baby boomers voted, yes, for the 94 crime bill. Okay, which means they locked up their own children. Okay, so when I say this, I mean that, black baby boomers have a suicidal mindset. They don't know how to make an adjustment. They could care less about, respecting your opinion. They think they know everything, but these are flawed, failed individuals that have no pathway forward. And the only reason that they communicate with you is because they're trying to convince you to take the poison pill that they have taken. But I'm here to tell you right now today, that's not going to happen. 11:20 on the West Coast. That is not going to happen. God's people shall not perish due to the lack of knowledge. So we're moving on, and we're going to do what's right, not only for ourselves and our community, but what's right by the people. Okay. So when the president talks about giving $1,000 investment accounts to babies, then my next question is, where do we sign these babies up? Not, oh, he lying. You believe what he got to say? No. Where do we sign these babies up, sir? Okay. Because like myself and most of you, who works, who have worked in corporate America, it doesn't matter if you like your boss or not. And a large volume of people, in terms of working on jobs, is the workplace environment, but if you got mortgage, you got your bills, your children, you could care less about any of that. I'm going to do my 8 and I'm going to skate. Okay. But you got individuals who will be in the break room, talking about everything else and focus on everything, but, mastering what they do. And this is why they're going to die in the wilderness. And this is why they're going to die broke. And this is why they will never be anything in life, because they can't even focus and figure out what their own purpose is. If you hate Trump, what's your purpose? That man is the president of the United States. That man is the first president that does not have a connection to slavery. And like I aforementioned earlier, Bill Clinton was born in Clinton County, Arkansas. Okay, he's a descendant of slave owners. Every president in the United States is associated with slaves, except Trump. Biden, he say from Delaware, that's the South. Okay, and one of his best friends, and he eulogized, and his name was Senator Byrd. And I did a piece, and they took my entire piece down off the internet and said it was mis and disinformation because Senator Byrd was not a grand wizard, but he was a known Klansman. So they deemed me because he was not a grand wizard. Okay, I was wrong on that, but he was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Fact. And Joe Biden eulogized him. Think about it. Just like Commie Karen or Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, eulogized a known Cuban communist. See, the thing about the communists and socialists, remember, we're not hearing anything about that. Okay. When Mom Dottie was running and all of that, he's a Muslim, and the communist argument and debate and all of the information started to come out, and they asked themselves, and they asked Zuckerberg and, all of the social media outlets, like, why are you guys allowing this hidden information to be put out on us? And the response was that you're trending. So once you trend and you get out there, that algorithm seeks and finds information on you to create a conversation, an argument, or a debate. So if you don't want to be exposed of who you truly are, then stay off the internet and stop with the rhetoric. And this is what they're doing right now, because the Democratic rhetoric got 2 National Guardsmen shot in DC, and the female actually died this week or last week. So now, they're silenced. They're not saying anything now. So now we get the bully pulpit in which we thought, and now we have this conversation. What do? Oh, let's turn the temperature down and hit their channels as well. But like I said, there's other outlets. So if you're on Facebook, hit A Better Black America talk radio show. My name is Bouchon Glover. You can follow me on my Facebook page. You can follow, more importantly, I want you to go follow me on A Better Black America talk radio show on Facebook. My name, Bouchon Glover, on Instagram. And we will be getting a TikTok, Patreon, and a Twitch in the next weeks to come. More than likely, we're going to launch these things at the beginning of the year because, like I said, if this platform does not want this type of content or communication, then we'll just go to the other contents. And believe me, they're paying, and they're paying well, meaning paying, P-A-Y-I-N-G, well. Facebook, well. Think about it. And that's real. So I knew that the Epstein Backfires title would backfire. I knew that the drone conversation, they don't want you to know the truth on that. They don't want you to know about Trump, creating $1,000 investment accounts for all newborn babies for presently, now, and for the remainder of his presidency. And they don't want to talk about ICE being in Minnesota due to all the fraud from all these Somalians and all of that. So this is why the foundational Black Americans, meaning as a Black American, Africans don't like us. They don't. All these other people of color, they have, we gotta just have that same energy. So I'm saying if Ilhan Omar can do what she did within the last 5 to 10 years, then we can do what we need to do within the next 5 to 6 months. We got to keep that same energy. We got to separate ourselves. The Democratic Party does not have a stronghold on Black America. It does not. It does not. Black America is Black America. And Black men are probably the most conservative human beings on the planet. We ain't with the LGBTQ. We ain't with the women's empowerment. We ain't with none of that. Okay? We're the head and not the tail. And this is why, as Black men, we're stepping up to the plate. And if we do this correctly, we can actually end racism in the United States, because racism could end in the United States if we correct and right the wrongs of Democratic past and get Black America into a position of power. Because when the Olympics come, I don't want to go to another community and spend my dollars. I want other communities to come to South Los Angeles and experience what we have created. But the only way we do this is if we sanctify ourselves, which merely means, separate ourselves from this political construct and start doing what we need to do. Good morning to you. And start doing what we need to do as a people. We can and we will. And like I said, all it takes is just enough faith as a mustard seed. And we got way more faith than that. So we're going to make it happen. It is what it is. So, like I said, I appreciate y'all this morning. And, I love y'all. And I'm going to keep the content going. And I'm going to continue to focus and make sure God's people do not perish due to the lack of knowledge. And let me see here. Somebody said, how do we expect to do that? Well, first of all, declare your independence. That's the first step. We can't do it as Democrats. Okay, we've been, Democrats for the last 60 years. And how far have that gotten Black America? They're literally trying to erase the entire race. We don't even call ourselves Black anymore. We're African Americans. And our African Americans are with the LGBTQ, the women's lib movement, which is the white, racist, liberal women, the Karens, and then the gay white men. And then we're, hiding behind, some white supremacy and the ghost of Democratic past. It is what it is. And individuals have you start organizing. Absolutely. You're having a conversation at one of the communication points of the organization. And it's a better Black America. Okay. And like I said, and the first step is declaring your independence. You got to be free. You cannot live on that plantation. You cannot support that plantation because, like I said, and hopefully, you got a good relationship with the higher power. And telling the truth is the only way we can do this, because the word of God tells me, the truth shall make us free. And the only way we can be free is having this conversation of the truth. That's the only way. Because these individuals, the Democrats, the baby boomers, they're going to die in the wilderness. And when I say this, they accept their fate. They're not really trying to do anything outside of just, live comfortable for the next, several years that they have on this planet, and this is why the media, they know they watch the media every day and they saying, oh, Trump's threatening to snap and all that, because that get them emotionally charged up. They're not threatening to snap, because they're stopping the fraud, because the fraud is crazy. If you did not know, when it comes to snapping food stamps, the government is telling, the states that they have to, share their information. And the states that have, they've already found 500,000 individuals getting paid twice. And they found over 1 million, food stamps or resource programs going out for dead people. Think about that. The same thing USAID did, the same thing that the Doge did, and then just look at the tariffs. And even with the tariff increases, President Trump has talked to the Department of Finance, and they're trying to figure out a way to give Americans $2,000 because of all the monies that the government is receiving due to the tariffs. But we can't have this conversation because we have what we call the opposition party and the resistance, whose job is to declare to block the blessings of individuals who could benefit from these resources. It is what it is. And let me see here. Somebody put in, Mr. Blake, how do I declare my independence with the steps to do that? First of all, stop saying what is your political connection? Are you Republican or are you a Democrat? Answer that question for me, and then I can give you a real answer. Now, how can I only be free if you know that? Let me see here. Like I said, freedom is a choice. First of all, you got to choose to be free. Okay, I'm free as free get. Okay, and I'm blessed, and I started this process within the last 8 to 9 years, and now it's starting to pay off in the form of commas. So now I could literally, pick and choose what I choose to do based on what I'm forced to do. Because when you got mouths to feed and, you got a mortgage and, your money's not, you got to go ahead and jump on somebody's workplace. Okay. And I've been fortunate enough to have, pretty good jobs to make sure that and finance the lifestyle that I'm comfortable with. And now I'm in a position to where not only can I finance, a lifestyle that I'm comfortable with, I could be, in a position to where, other individuals, the cup runneth over, because like I said, the Bible says that, God is, that we have never seen a righteous man or woman forsaken, or their seed beggeth bread. So if we continue to be righteous, then our seeds won't beg bread. That means that we got in abundance to where our children's children is cool. Okay, that's what we call the overflow. So what I'm saying is declare your independence. I'm not even saying go re-register or anything like that. But I'm saying is you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat, you're a nonpartisan independent, meaning, let the Republicans do what the Republicans do, let the Democrats do what the Democrats do, and you continue to communicate with like minds. And when it's time for you to put your vote, you vote for the president that's going to help your situation or circumstance personally. Okay. And as a conservative black man, I did not vote for President Trump. I did not vote for Kamala Harris. I wrote in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Okay. Because neither side deserved my vote. Okay. And as a registered Democrat, I did vote for Bush twice because I was in the working for a real estate brokerage firm at the time, and I needed, the Bushes to be in office so I could continue getting, that big money we was making at that time. Let me see here. What else we got? Facts. I appreciate that. Let me see here. Don't be fools of these devils. They are running game in the banks, hospitals, and schools. Absolutely. And I wish you was on a little earlier, because that's the whole purpose and the premise of this conversation. Because when we talked about, health insurance, that's a scam. We need health care, meaning it's there when you need it, not you're paying a premium and you're paying, co-pays and all of this stuff just to enrich the manufacturers or the insurance companies. And they say Trump got a heart like Hitler, but yeah, Trump signed a deal to where we pay market value and we don't pay a penny more than any other country when it comes to pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, I'm gonna put a list together. Okay, we're gonna do it probably on the New Year's show, and I'm just gonna let you know that, like I said, I'm a historian, a political scientist, and just off the top of my brain, I can't even think about another individual or another president that has done more for this country in their whole first term or second term, versus 8 years versus what Trump has done within the first year and 6 months. And that's crazy. And I'm not even, I'm not even a Republican or a MAGA. I'm an American. I got to call it how I see it. Somebody jumped in the comments. Let me see here. But what about getting to the doctor to be able to have the cheap meds prescribed? Well, this is why, the Obamacare has to be repealed and replaced. The Affordable Care Act is an epic failure. And we're going to be implementing the Healthy America Act. It was introduced by moi about a month ago. So going into 2026, we're going to be having these conversations. So you will be able to just, if you got a medical condition, go get healed, go get cured. Okay. Not go get something to deal with the pain or something to deal with the ailment. No, we want healing. We don't want to continue with this racket. So this is why the medical field, got to be rebranded, because it should not be from an independent perspective. Because just say, for instance, if you are a master surgeon, and then you have your own practice. So now you are picking individuals who have the right insurance or can afford these surgeries, which is not fair to an average American. The government should pay you, take care of you to do your job, and then send that bill to the government and let them take care of it. That's what has to be done moving forward when it comes to repealing and replace the Unaffordable Care Act, known as Obamacare. Okay, we need health care, not health insurance, because a lot of individuals don't get sick, just like you pay car insurance, and a lot of individuals do not have car accidents or claims, but they're paying into a system, and there's individuals who's scamming and creating these things so they can actually get paid. So we can't have that. We got to figure out what we need. And let me see here. Somebody put in, yes, we need that list. Well, they got about 12, 13 more days. Because remember, Trump signed the bill when it passed on the House floor. Trump signed it immediately. And they have 30 days from that particular time to release the names. And right now, they're redacting some stuff right now because a lot of the stuff is national security. And I believe the president was trying to protect the integrity of the United States, because Bill and Hillary Clinton is all over the Epstein files. Okay. He even put out that Prince Andrew was out there, and I did the research on that, and Prince Andrew has been kicked out of the royal palace. Okay, he is not known as a prince anymore, and he will not get any royalties from the royal palace, and that's Prince Andrew. So if you got Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Hakeem Jeffries, who was soliciting campaign funding from this known sex offender, and Stacey Plaskett, who was texting a convicted sex offender, that's when the Democrats said, you know what, we got to stop because the Epstein files backfired on them. This is why we're not hearing anything right now. This is why just a few people on, they don't want to talk about it right now, because it exposed them for who they are. And Jasmine Crockett went on record and said that, the Democrats have no moral component or any moral standard to adhere to. And that's sad. Okay, and that's sad. And I mean, somebody put he had since 2016 to come up with a healthcare plan, and it still has nothing. Well, it's not Trump's responsibility to come up with a healthcare plan. That's not how it works. Okay, you have to have support from the House of Congress and then the Senate as well, and then there has to be people having these conversations. So since you are concerned about healthcare, would you prefer to move on from health insurance to healthcare? Because there's two different things. So we want healthcare. Health insurance is a scam. And the only individuals that get rich is these insurance providers, because they take these premiums and it's a slush fund and they'll be willing to pay for your surgeries. But at the end of the year, their job is to make a profit. So with that being said, we're going to have to move from health insurance to health care. That's the key. That's the key. And somebody put in, that's not true. It's always on TV here in Washington, D.C. And the Epstein files are on all the time. Okay, well, that's fine. Because like I said, if you're in D.C., I got to take your word for it. But here locally, they don't even mention it here in L.A. at all. But it is what it is. And I appreciate you from Washington, D.C. for commenting. Hit that like, hit that notification. It helps the algorithm. I appreciate you on that. But any more comments or concerns, because I'm about to get up out of here. Been over here for over an hour. So we doing it. But I'm going to start doing these lives, and I'm going to have the Twitch going, the Patreon going, the Facebook, all these different platforms going on at the same time, because depending on, the title or the click bait that you put in the for the title, then, they got a way that they can actually shadow ban, because I know they don't want us talking about the Epstein files, fired on the Democrats, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Hakeem Jeffries sending an email trying to get to know Jeffrey better, Stacey Plaskett texting. Okay, so shut that down. So the Epstein files backfired. The drones, they trying to make a big deal out of that. But hey, if you don't want to get shot down or killed by the Department of War, don't run drugs. It is what it is. Okay, and the order more than likely went down, kill everybody. What we're going to do, shoot down a Venezuelan drug boat or some drug runners, and then a few people did not die. We're supposed to go pick them up and no. Finish the job. Okay, Trump, $1,000 investments for babies born today and for the remainder of his presidency. That's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to be figuring it out. I'm going to get the link, and I'm going to have as many people sign up as possible, because I could only imagine 8 years from now seeing how beautiful that thing would actually be. And then ICE in Minnesota and all the fraud that's going on with these Somalian immigrants, get them up out of here, send them back to the country. It is what it is, because they're taking opportunities out of the mouths of American citizens. And somebody's just going crazy right now. Let me jump in these comments. Let me see here. You need to leave spitting that nonsense, and you believing it is as a black man. What do you mean? You need to leave spitting this nonsense? No. This is a free black man having a conversation. So the last thing you need to do is tell another individual what they need to do. You need to respect the fact that I have enough heart and enough courage to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Okay? Because I'm not on the plantation anymore. Okay? I really never been, but if I was, they'll be trying to hang and lynch me like they do in the Willie Lynch. But we're not going to go there. Okay? Let me see here. Let me see here. Federal judge said they need to speed up the release of the Epstein files. Let's get this thing correct. The Epstein files will be released. Trump signed the paperwork signed the bill when the House of Congress voted and passed the Epstein files. So basically, since then, they have 30 days from the day Trump signed the bill to release the files. So the files will be released. It is what it is. And when you say you sound like it, what does that mean? Summer fine 99. Okay, they filed to have some of the information suppressed. Well, like I said, that's government. As a former DOD contractor, that's the government. They have to retract, they have to redact. Some things are classified. Okay, some things are classified. So it's not some scheme behind, manipulating. No, these are government officials doing their job to make sure that they protect national security. That's what that's all about. It is what it is. And let me see here. What happened to all those videos Epstein had? That is a great question. The Democrats just released some videos of his mansion. So where's the rest of them? That is a great question. And then summer fine 99. And the judge said, no, like I said, judges have nothing to do with this administration. Okay. appellate judge or Obama court appointee has nothing to do with it. The president of the United States, that's the executive in chief. And it's the executive office, the legislative branch, which is the Congress and the Senate, and judicial. That's it right there. Those judges are hired guns. You can watch any mob movie, they get paid off. And just like the blockage of the Epstein files up until this point has been blocked by Barack Obama appointees. It is what it is. It is what it is. So I think that's it. If you got anything else, throw it in the comments. But right now, man, I got to go. And I appreciate y'all, man. Hit that like, hit that notification. And like I said, next time I'm going to try my best to figure out a different tagline, because clearly they don't want us talking about the Epstein files backfiring on the Democrats, implicating Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, implicating Prince Andrew, implicating Hakeem Jeffries, soliciting campaign fundings from a, known sex offender who pled guilty for human trafficking and prostitution of minors. Stacey Plaskett texting, the known sex offender, convicted sex offender during the congressional hearing. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about Trump willing to invest $1,000 into, the baby's futures. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about all the fraud that's going on by the Democrats in Minnesota, led by the elected Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from Somalia. And Trump told them, to go back to their country. And I'm with him on that, because they have no love for foundational Black Americans. So get up out of here, go back home, do what you need to do. It is what it is. And I appreciate your good time. And that's me shaking your hand. And y'all have a good day, man. It's your man, Bouchon Glover, signing out of Better Black America TV on YouTube. And you just have listened to the Better Black America Talk Radio Show live on YouTube. And we'll be streaming on all these other platforms. With that being said, y'all have an amazing day. Peace out.